Hi, and welcome to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth, where a mental health nurse and an accountant talk about wealth creation, personal development, and financial independence in the UK to help you live the life you deserve.
Hello and welcome back. This is episode 30. You have both Alexes back again, and today we're going to do part two to the extra income short series. So, we're going to talk about other ways we can think of that regular people can bring extra money into their lives. It's kind of a follow on from episode 28. So, I had a short gap with a guest in between that. So, this is part two, which may run into a third part. Who knows? Alex and I will decide, I guess, as we go. But briefly, we're going to discuss things like casual work, which is something like Fiverr, Upwork, or similar, buy-to-lets, sales of your own kind of creations, and just other places you can add value to other people's lives. Because probably a lot of people listening to this, you have a skill set that somebody would pay for. You can do something that is in need or in demand from somebody else. So we're going to dig a bit into that, a bit of the nuance as well. And we'll talk a little bit about how it can impact or accelerate your journey towards financial independence.
Yeah, brilliant. No, hi everybody, and again, thanks for tuning in. And there's a lot to talk about still, and yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this did roll into a third episode. But yeah, Alex, should we maybe start with the buy-to-lets just as a kind of a segue from the last episode was very much about property income as kind of using your own properties to make money, and buy-to-lets is always a bit of a big topic, I find, and one which some people see as being almost like a silver bullet of a ways to, you buy a buy to let and then you're going to be sat on a beach for the rest of your life just counting the money. And I've done, I've never owned a buy to let property, and I've known people who have, and certainly it's not as passive as one might think it is. There tends to be a lot of hassle and headache, and the amount, given the tax changes probably over the last 5 or 6 years, certainly like the bottom line cash flow that you get from buy to lets, depending on your tax bracket, isn't probably as much as you'd think. And yeah, so have you had experience, Alex, with buy to let? I know is it your one of your parents has had properties before?
Yeah, so my mum um, is a boomer basically, and she's benefited massively from some frankly ridiculous property value increase over the last kind of 40 years or so. I think when I first spoke to them about that, they bought their first house, which was I think a 2 or 3 bedroom semi or something. And it was in the 80s. I want to say it was late. When was I born? 88, right? So it was a little bit before that, and it was like £12,000, which is kind of crazy when you think about it now. But it would have been a lot of money kind of back then. And she does have, back on topic, a couple of buy to lets at the moment, and she does rent them out to supplement her pension. And to be honest, put me right off it. It's I just hear stories from her of just constant work on her behalf. And bear in mind, they have a letting agent. They don't do all this themselves. It's a considerable amount of effort and time that she's sinking into kind of overseeing these things, swapping out stuff like appliances if they wear out, and just loads of different activities and stuff that just takes up a load of mental and physical time. And some of these are dealt with by the letting agent. They're kind of there as your shield and to deal with some of these things. And she's still kind of working. Basically, it's kind of like a part-time job to her. So it's, in all honesty, properly put me off anything like that. I mean, I always think that my kind of stock portfolio, my index fund kind of portfolio, is never going to ring me at whatever time of day to say, well, this doesn't work, that's leaking, the roof's missing a tile, something's run out of batteries or whatever. It's just never going to do that. It's literally going to sit passively in the background and I can look out the window.
Yeah, because that's quite interesting that your mum uses a letting agency, because a lot of the time the sales pitch from them is it's almost we'll take it off your hands, manage it, and send you a check at the end of the month with your money. but it's always good to hear some like first-hand feedback on actually that you still get a lot of pestering and stuff. And but yeah, I mean, I've tried to model out a few different scenarios of potentially buying another property, and for when you look at consider that you need a high deposit, so you need a 25% deposit on any buy-to-let mortgage. They're like the interest rates are a lot higher, the product fees tend to be more. You then refinance them every couple of years because if you then fall off the tariff, the this kind of standard rate is significantly higher than the fixed amount. So there's just that as one element, but then the way that now the tax system has changed makes it much more. It's not as beneficial given how because you used to be able to deduct the tax from deduct all the mortgage interest um, from the income that you got, which was one of the big costs. Because I guess with buy-to-lets, you're taxed on the profit it makes as opposed to the income. So you essentially want to have as much cost in there as possible, and so to kind of it reduces your profit and the amount of tax that you pay. But the the kind of notional amount of interest that you used to be able to deduct is no longer there, and so you end up paying a lot more tax on that. So rather than seeing buy-to-let as a way of kind of giving me loads of passive income, which I'm just going to use to live off, the way I would almost look at it, the way I was modeling mine was I'm still going to have to pay. It would be all of them I looked at were cash flow negative. So I would after tax, so I'd have to still pay out money to essentially to the tax man, but that would probably be 20 to 30% of the total cost of if I were to not have tenants into that, giving me income. So it would almost be a subsidy of buying a house, and then you hope that through appreciation of the property price, that's how you essentially get your return. But yeah, it didn't. For me, it was because I grew up similar. I know we're similar ages, Alex, and my parents were always like, "Oh, you just can't go wrong with property, and we'll get buy to let, and live happily ever after of passive income." They never actually went down that route. And so I almost went in looking at it with rose-tinted spectacles. And when you actually run the numbers, it was, yeah, I couldn't fully understand this whole dream of, oh, you just get a buy-to-let and you get loads of money every month and then that's it. Because there's a, huge amount of tax and other things to pay. And it's the way you look at it. If you just want to be subsidizing purchasing a property empire, then that's the way to look at it, as opposed to giving me loads of income is the opportunities I've looked at. And those have been usually kind of city centre apartments targeted at really students or like young professionals. So nothing too overly ambitious. But that's kind of where I got to with it. And yeah, similarly, I've heard stories of late night phone calls and tenants not paying or leaving a mess or causing noise with the neighbors. So yeah, I think my takeaway from it is to probably just not assume that buy to let is the way to go, but really do your homework and run the numbers and look at what is your objective from it. And um, but yeah, I think it's definitely not to discount buy to lets. I'm definitely not against them, um, but it's just to be really mindful of what you're getting into before you do it. And if you're looking at buying buy-to-let property without any mortgages, um, there are alternatives such as, real estate investment trusts or REITs, which these are companies which own huge amounts of property, usually across the country or across the globe, and their job is to buy property, rent them out, and then they pay a regular dividend out to their investors. And the yield on those REITs is usually quite strong. So usually, 3.5, 4.5% type range, and have very strong track records of payment. And so comparing that to a rental property that you'd buy for cash, there's probably not a huge amount in it, but a lot less headache through just buying a REIT. And if you want your money back, you sell the REIT. It clears in 3 days and you've got your money. And try and sell a house, it takes a lot longer. So there are definitely alternatives, but Yeah, I think probably growing up in similar households to you, Alex, is property and can never go wrong with property is probably one of the things that, was most said with my parents when it came to that. So, but yeah, still can't get it to work on my spreadsheets.
I'm glad you've done the maths, to be honest. I mean, when people say that, they are generally, I think, people who have benefited massively from the ridiculous rise in property, and it's not necessarily going to continue in that pathway. I mean, when you were talking, I was just thinking that past results are not an indicator of future performance that we see on every kind of stock fund anywhere. And I would take the same approach that if houses continue to rise as they have done since we've kind of been born up until now, we're in our mid 30s, it would just be, frankly, ridiculous in terms of buying. I mean, it's ridiculous now, but if you times my house by even 2 times in value, I couldn't afford it on my salary. No way. So I just think it's something that used to work. There's been loads of changes underneath the Conservative government that have made it not or less viable for smaller kind of landlords. So the typical buy-to-let person has what, one, 2 or 3 properties, something like that, and it's not their main kind of business. Whereas if you're a career landlord and you're buying like streets at a time or something, and you've got kind of big punchy money to play with, then it makes a big difference. And it's not the difference between kind of a single kind of landlord having your one primary residence and one rental, perhaps, and you're banking on it going up in value over time, and you can sell it and release some of the cash to fund your retirement, etc. That's if you miss a payment or you get a bad tenant or something happens to that house, meaning it can no longer provide you with an income, you might be in real trouble. Like, you'd be in big beans at that point. Whereas if someone who owns, say, 400 houses, one of them doesn't cash flow one month or for a year, it's kind of a drop in the ocean. It's not going to make any difference to someone of that magnitude. And generally, they're big businesses, banks, like established landlords who deal with all of the issues that kind of our parents perhaps have encountered or other smaller landlords have encountered, and they deal with them in other ways. So it's, yeah, I don't think I'll ever own a buy to let. I mean, I might correct that at some point. I've no idea if it changes, but right now, the way it's going, I feel like it's a little bit immoral. And also, I feel like it's so much more effort than I'm prepared to put in for a non-guaranteed gain. Really, I think gone are the days where you just get a good tenant for life and they pay 2 houses, and at the end of it, you've got 2 houses and they've got none. Despite working really hard, and a lot of people, I think, especially our age and below, would perhaps take a moral stance to that and just say, I don't agree with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for where I fall on the with the properties, if I were to do anything, it would be buy something that really needed a lot of work, do it up, and then sell it on. That's a more appealing to me than renting out with like buy to let. But yeah, I mean, hopefully, when we're talking on the eve of a general election, it will have happened by the time this goes out, and all of the parties are pledging to be building millions more houses over the next 5 years to alleviate some of the pressure on the housing market. Because if you compare us to Europe and to the US, our houses are so expensive because there isn't enough supply, and the supply that's there is it's quite tired as well. And so the government's pledging whoever gets in to be building a lot more and to relax the planning laws and free up some additional land to help that come about. But I guess that with it there comes then further compromise, and it's you give up a bit of your green belt for additional houses to build on and to relieve some of the pressure. And so yeah, it'd be an interesting one to see what happens over the next however many 5 years or so with the housing. Um, but yeah, it's no doubt it's so hard now to get on the housing market as a young person, and I think you just have to look at multiplier of the income to the house price. It's gone from something like was it like 2 or 3 in the 1970s, and it's now about 10 times the average salary is the price of a house on average. So
which is
no
ridiculous,
matter,
isn't it?
yeah,
It's kind of impossible to get to. And I was listening to a bit of a show the other day by Damien Talks Money, his Making Money podcast, and he had a journalist on there who said the difference with the ongoing kind of generations, millennials and downwards, it's the people who have help from their elder relatives or not. And it's just whether you have help or whether you don't have help. And that's the deciding factor. It's not necessarily the haves and the have nots. It's whether your family can and will pass any of that wealth that they've made down to you, or whether you don't. And another another thing just about houses and stuff, and people, like I live in a small village right in Kent, and a couple of years ago there's a parish council and etc. They're kind of making noises about building houses on land in and around the village on the farmland, and people here are angry at that, and they're all, to be honest, much older than I am, and they're kind of furious at it. They're like, I don't want to look at other houses. I want to look at fields and blah blah blah, and build them somewhere else, just not next to me. But everyone says the same thing, and then you end up building them nowhere. And I feel like people really misunderstand how much of the UK has been built on. And I was just looking at a news article, and kind of some statistics here that they did the poll in 2023, and generally Brits think almost half of England has been built on, like 50% is now kind of grey, covered in buildings. But the actual figure is less than 10%. I think it's like 9 point something percent is actually been built on, and the rest of it's green.
yeah. Wow, I didn't realize it was that low. To be honest, I
No,
wouldn't have
me
thought it was
neither.
as high as 50%. But yeah, wow, there's definitely, and I think you just got to look at like around Europe and stuff as well. Like there's ways of building and it looking nice, and use sustainable materials, and you build with good looking bricks, and I don't know, like you can make houses look very nice and be very energy efficient and very future proof. So
Definitely. I
yeah,
mean, some of the housing stock in the UK is terrible, isn't it?
oh,
In
it's
terms of
horrible.
efficiencies and like just what's kind of rented to people or given to people. And I always think that nobody wants building to happen in their backyard, but also people need places to live. So the house that I live in now is an old nurse's house for one of the mental health hospitals that was down the road from us, which has now been demolished and a housing estate put on that land. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of houses up there. But those people, like the people who used to live in these houses, had children and they wanted to live close by. So without that housing estate that's there, it's not massive by any means. It's kind of small and a bit nice. But without those extra infrastructure in that building, your kids don't have anywhere to live. So the more people, the more kind of people have families and people kind of emigrate into the UK, etc., they have to have somewhere to live. And the answer can't be just not in my backyard, just build them somewhere else, because that's just not, it's not doable. And if someone had said that resolutely before kind of these houses that I live in now, the house that I live in was built in 1920 or something. If that happened and people really put their foot down and this house didn't exist, then I wouldn't have anywhere to live. So because some planning and building has happened in the past means we at least have some houses, unless people want some people to have houses and the rest of the people are just kind of, I don't know, living in tents or something. And I think people think too much about themselves and not enough about other people, because you can't have a thriving global like population and not give them anywhere to live. It seems nonsensical to me. You're thinking short term, not long term.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a really good point.
Mm. Okay, I think we've covered kind of buy to lets. Would you ever do buy to lets? Assuming you can afford it and justify it, etc. But if you can get the maths to stack, is it something you would entertain or not?
No, I still prefer having my investments outside. I'd rather invest. For me, I'd get exposure to property through real estate trusts, and partly it's because of the government can change. Every budget that it does, there's a risk that the tax position will change on buy-to-lets, and also it doesn't. I like the idea of having, I think with houses it's tangible and you can see it, and it's quite a simple business to understand. But yeah, I wouldn't go down the buy-to-let route if I could stack it up. I think if anything with property, it would be very much a buy like a derelict barn and then do it up. It's kind of that type of extreme renovation as opposed to, or maybe not that extreme, but it would be that type of thing as opposed to put some tenants into a house and rent it out. But yeah, how about you? I mean, it sounds like you're pretty a quite staunch no on this.
Yeah, I just can't. I don't feel like when I'm working full time, like I don't have the energy to do these things. Like if I had a second house and I had to constantly manage it and field phone calls from people and deal with letting agents and worry about all the things I worry about with my current house in terms of water leaks, roofing, all sorts of other stuff. If I doubled all of that, I don't think I could
Yeah.
function. I just feel, honestly, I feel like it would be way too much for one or kind of two people to deal with. Yeah, I just don't think, I don't think it's on the cards for me whatsoever. I think even if I had 25% as a deposit of another house, I would much rather have that in the market than in another property. I really would. Even if in 20 or 30 years' time, I would have come out on top financially by having the property. If you minus the amount of hours and effort you have to put in, like I'm kind of on this journey to remove stress, not add it. And I really feel like entering the buy-to-let market and rentals and tenants is just not a way to remove stress. It's a surefire way to add stress and complication.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And if there are any listeners out there who uh, completely disagree, it'd be great to get your opinion. I'd like to be proved wrong. Uh,
Same, yeah. Email us,
yeah,
right? Tell us if you're 25 and you're buying your fourth house or whatever, and you're
you
renting
just
it
bought a
that
block
well.
of
Go for
flats.
it.
Yeah, let me know. I'd
Yeah,
like to.
you.
Yeah, I might change my mind completely.
Yeah, I mean, buying a whole block of flats. How many buy-to-lets do you have? Oh, about 15 in one block.
Yeah, that's it.
Um, but then aren't you at risk of just having it all in one location? Is it diverse? Mm, who knows? It's food for thought. Okay. In other kind of things we mentioned earlier, so the rise in casual digital work, I think, has been a bit crazy since the pandemic. And I looked at some stats for a company called Upwork, which was originally founded as a merger in 2013, 2014, that kind of era. And it's basically online freelance work. And Upwork is just a similar thing, but it's a platform for people to go and say, I can do X, I'll do it for X amount of money per hour. And a lot of what I've seen is creative. So it's like video editing, podcast editing. I mean, Alex and I found our editing chap, Caspian, he was a real good egg. Found him on Upwork, and it's loads of different people like that. And the rise in stuff like that since the pandemic has been humongous. I think Upwork turnover 680 plus million pounds now, whereas back in 2016 it was about 160 something. So that just proves, and that's only one of the websites. There are loads of others. It proves that there are people out there with extra skills who they are marketable skills that you can get paid for. And if you think that perhaps that might be you, have a look. Just type in whatever you're good at. If it's digital, if it's online, if it's, I don't know, proofreading, translating languages, who knows? Have a look and see. And if you need to put a couple of hours in a week, or I don't know, 10 hours a month or something, just to bring some extra cash in, it's allowed people to do that. And personally, I love it because it's made our lives easier. Caspian's very, very good at what he does, and it removes you and I having to do something like that would take us twice as long, and we'd do it half as well.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's one of those platforms where it's, if you've got a skill which you will have, that's marketable, get yourself on there, and you can always trial it. It's not like you're signing up for a job. Put it up, see what kind of clients you get. And again, it's still kind of an extension of trading your time for money, but it's a good way of, there's a ready market there for skills, and I'm sure that, you know, you'll have the ones that you'll be able to market, and yeah, it's just a good way of getting some cash in, in the short term. I think there's, people use like Fiverr and Upwork and things as their main source of income to get clients. So, if you were thinking of freelancing and as a way of moving away from your traditional employment, even just starting there, and if you find that you build a following and you start getting a good reputation, it could always be that platform then to, almost that springboard to transition you from paid work, from a kind of traditional employment, into a more flexible freelance type way of working. So yeah, I think they're brilliant kind of inventions, and should definitely use them.
Hi. So when Alex and I recorded this episode around extra income part two, we had some tech issues which have been brought to light by our editing chap Caspian. So if it sounds a little bit choppy, a little bit kind of imperfect, then that is why. Alex and I have redone portions of this, and Caspian's worked exceptionally hard to kind of migrate three parts of this episode all together. So we appreciate your work, my friend.
Yes, I was second that. Thank you, Caspian, for bringing this to our attention and for working so hard to fix it. So I think in terms of where we got to, so Alex, I was going to ask you a question just around. So we talked about a lot of things on property and buy to lets and things like that on the episode. But when it comes to, if you were to like selling some of your own skills, there's loads of websites out there now, such as Fiverr and Upwork, where you can literally find any service and you can offer yourself as a supplier of those services, or you can obviously take them from others. But have you ever used any websites like that to maybe sell some of your, like, whether it's like mental health coaching or anything like that?
No, so I haven't. I've looked on those kind of things, and a lot of them are kind of digital type stuff, digital kind of content creation or services like editing video, audio, or anything like that. It's yeah, so it's not something I've ever done. I don't know if it would be a bit like therapy, I guess, if I was to offer like some of those some mental health coaching. The one thing though I have thought about doing is I'm quite good at human anatomy, like biology, so I probably have enough knowledge to teach something like first year biology to nursing students, something like that. And I wonder whether in the future I might do some not like revision sessions, but just like a basic overview, like recordings perhaps, and you can just re-watch, re-listen. So maybe that could feature. I've thought about it more than once, but yeah, never done anything more than that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, yeah, I'm similar. I have put some of my services up on Fiverr before, but I do find, yeah, it's quite crowded. Certainly for I was put mine up for more like some of the financial modeling stuff that I do, like quite work related. Um, but yeah, I struggled to get much traction on there. Um,
Did you get any traction?
no, not really. So, so but I
Okay.
find that there's quite a lot of competition who charge ridiculously low rates, and I'm not willing to sell my time for like £5 an hour.
Oh no, that's far too little. I mean, I
Exactly.
guess that's a race to the bottom, isn't it? And I feel like maybe you get what you pay for in that field.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's it. And so I gave it a try, but yeah, it didn't. Not much came. And maybe I'll in the future try again and try. I might need to get some services to help me sell it better from there.
Maybe similar optimization, but I think it depends what people want. If they want value, it's better to speak to someone like you with an accountancy background. And yes, you might cost, I don't know, 50, 80, £100 an hour, but the amount of value you can bring to that hour might change somebody's trajectory and it could save them thousands of pounds. Whereas you can speak to someone who charges you £5 an hour for 1,000 hours and they're never going to save you any money at all.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's really, but I think it is very hard to sell, and unfortunately I'm not a natural salesman either. But I think with a lot of these things and trying, there's absolutely no harm in trying anything. And my view has always been that if even if you try something and it doesn't work, you'll still have learned something as part of the process. And whether that be, new skills, like, for example, obviously wrote my book a few years ago, and that's, having to learn how to obviously write succinctly and self-publish and get coordinate, but the front cover being done and making sure I'm in, aligning with all the policies on Amazon and things. So there's a lot that goes into what might seem just like quite a small project, and even like building websites and blogs and things. You're learning really good transferable skills, and even if they don't blow up and you don't become this huge success that you might want, you'll have developed a load of skills which you can then put to good use in other areas. And I always think there's always absolutely no harm in trying um, on any of those. And so, and a big one, especially if you're trying to fit in like a side hustle or something around your main job, is time management and being really efficient with your time. That is a skill that will pay dividends for you for life, and being disciplined of at this weekend I need to have done X, Y, and Z, and that my side gig, then um you know that discipline goes into like your main employment. You then perform better at work, and there's opportunities for extra pay rises and so on and so forth. And also, you never know where it can end up. Like, I never thought during COVID, when I was writing my book, that I'd be doing a podcast with yourself. So unintended opportunities come out from everywhere, and not necessarily as part of the original plan.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really kind of funny way of looking at it. And I was just thinking about when you said you wrote your book, you didn't expect it to be like a million copy bestseller straight out the gates. That's really difficult to do. And you need practice and you need to know so much more than an in-depth knowledge of content for your book and kind of copywriting, etc. There's so much more to it than just writing it and handing it to a publisher to do all the work. Like for you to have self-published it, you've learned an awful lot of transferable skills. You have to have, as you say, the discipline, the will to write when you don't feel like writing, which is huge. I mean, if we take something like, have you read Atomic Habits by James Clear?
I have, yes.
Yeah, so all time kind of one of my favorite books. So he hasn't written many books. I don't think he has any other books out right now, and it's not that he just wrote Atomic Habits one weekend and it's become an automatic kind of millionaire status, sold hundreds of thousands of millions of copies, etc. He wrote a blog called Passive Panda for years and years and really honed his craft. And it took years for that to happen, but it looks like he's just become this overnight sensation. But no one sees the hard work and the graft, the early nights, the late nights, the working when you don't feel like working, the missed opportunities elsewhere because you've put your time into that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a lot that goes on. Did they say it takes 20 years to become an overnight success?
Yeah, at least something like
Yeah.
that.
And so I think on all these pursuits, it's definitely, I think that there's always benefits to doing it. And I think even, getting the job, I currently work for Amazon. It's like a super competitive place to get into, but the fact that I'd done, I guess, a professional qualification. So I'd done my accountancy qualification. I then did on that was supported through my employer. I then did a second one, which was not supported by my employer, in corporate treasury, which is a super niche area within finance. But that was off my own back. And then I'd done the book. You're proving to potential employers that you can be self-disciplined, you're creative, you're willing to try things.
You have initiative.
Initiative, yeah. And that got me like a easily like 50% pay rise by going there. So it's almost all of this work doing it. The reward might not come in the way that you think it might. It can come somewhere else.
No, and it's probably enhanced every area of your life. in different ways that perhaps are immeasurable, but it's made like I don't know, a 10% improvement here, 5% here, 20% there, 50% pay rise. And it just shows if you are working like in that field and it is super competitive, you have to do something to stand out. So you said you did this thing for Fiverr, and it's hard to make yourself stand out. It's hard to grab attention, and it's hard to kind of keep eyeballs focused on you. Whereas if you go to an interview and there are 50 people going for this kind of hype accountancy thing, and you're the only one that self-published a book and taken this corporate treasury qualification off your own back, that immediately puts your head above other people's because they'll recognize that, and it helps honestly when people who can make those decisions about who to hire and who to not, it helps keep you memorable, which is why for every job I ever go to, I always wear a suit, I always wear nice shoes, and I always wear some kind of layery tie. And again, if you see 10 people in grey suits and black ties, they all fade in together. But if you see someone in a blue suit with brown shoes and a pink tie, it's kind of eye catching, and it's not failed. And I'm not saying I get jobs just because of the suit, but I don't think it has a downside.
It's a lucky suit. I'll borrow it next time.
Yeah, maybe. And it's just one other thing, Alex, to round this off a little bit. If you hadn't written the book, I don't think you and I would have met or spoken.
No,
because you sent me a copy of your book.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the opportunities just you kind of have throw it out into the universe, and somehow it seems to make the jigsaw pieces fit together eventually. And
yeah, there's something here about the harder you work, the more you do, the luckier you get.
I think that's definitely true. Yeah, so I mean, I think to sum up, there's loads of different ways of earning some extra income. I think there's definitely never any harm in trying. You never know where things are going to end up. You could end up, your side business, baking cakes or something could actually turn into a full-time job, and then you end up, working in your dream profession, never having to work a day in your life again. So I think hopefully, I know this episode has been a bit patchy just because of the technical issues, but hopefully we still managed to get some value out of it, and some of the key points that we've been trying to get across. And yeah, we'd be really keen on hearing from you on maybe you've tried something and it's worked really well, in which case kudos, and or maybe you've tried something and it hasn't worked out, but you've learned a lot from it. Either way, I think it'd be great to hear from you. And yes, thanks again for your patience, and thanks again once more to Caspian for all your work in putting together about 15 different audio files to come up with the episode. And yeah, if we'd also love it, if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it. Hit the 5-star button on Spotify. That would be a lovely gesture, and help us with the algorithm. But yeah, we really love doing this podcast. We get a lot from it, and hopefully you do too. So thanks very much.
None of what we discuss on the show is to be considered financial or health advice, and we recommend you always do your own research or consult an independent financial advisor or a doctor when making your financial or health decisions.